Thank you so much for joining me today. We'll be talking about this incredible transit of Saturn through Pisces starting pretty much now, starting in early March 2023 and ending in February 2026. So this is going to be a very, very hard one for us if we haven't got anything prepared for later on. So Pisces Saturn likes to ask the big questions, like, for example, did you save enough money? Did you try to get a job? Did you get qualified? Have you got enough, basically? So this is not for every single person. This is not going to touch certain people's lives at all. If you've got what it takes, if you're very, very strong, or if your parents have set you up pretty good. But for most people, there's going to be some questions, and I think there's going to be some questions of credentials, of heritage, of family names, of how your parents have done it, if you fit into society also, yeah, or if you got what it takes to last the long haul. So here we are, like, say, in a beautiful place such as Peru. There's going to have to be questions, So for example, like, people living here are going to maybe be questioned as to why they're here. Also, for example, on the other side, having a garden and growing trees, like fruit trees, and growing your own vegetables is going to be something that is going to be very helpful for some. I'm not telling you that this is a very, very, very hard time. I'm not trying to freak you out, as some astrologers probably would. Probably for good reason, but Saturn in Pisces isn't going to ask very nicely of you. It's just going to be very rude and very mean and very rough sometimes. And we do have to have some things prepared in order to not fall, basically. So credentials, paperwork, passports, residencies, anything to do with also leftover money, like money that's been sitting there in the bank for a long time, or things that have been given to you by your grandparents or your parents. This is something that's very, very good for some people. So having some family money or some savings. But it's not just about this, it's just about being careful with things and making sure that nothing falls, basically, because Pisces is a sleepy sign. It is sometimes a very emotional, hysterical sign. Saturn doesn't like it in Pisces. They're not very compatible energies. But what we have to do is try to understand the logistics without being too mean or too crooked, because there are going to be some people trying to lie, as Pisces is a famous sign for bending the truth, trying to lie and trying to weasel their way out of some very, very strong circumstances. So that means, in terms of, like, say, a refugee crisis or any other crisis in the world, there's going to be some dangers here. I feel is going to be very hard to find a place for some people. There's going to be a lot of lies and a lot of thieves during this time, and people just basically trying to be barely noticed, while other people have got no idea what is going on. There might be another layer of society developing here, and another rule book or another law that comes from criminal activity and criminal organizations as well. So in terms of crime and criminals, I already talked a lot about this in the Rabbit Year 2023. There is, you guys, you have no idea what is going on underneath. Like, there are some very, very extreme ways that money's been made, or that people are making a living, or just the kind of positions in life that people are getting used to, as a kind of a conglomerate that lives kind of separate from the honest people. So being dishonest really hurts us later on. But in some ways, yeah, I can see how alternative dishonest or fraudulent relationships and experiences can be made. So we've got to be very careful. Inviting new people into our lives, we have to also be careful in case we are doing something that is dishonest or not on the right side of the law. Also, criminal activity can be seen in that which is normal as well. So, for example, living in certain places or being part of a certain world can be questioned. Being asked also to leave, being asked to change, or being asked to provide money, like, for example, payment of fines or taxes. Taxes might be a very, very risky business here. and they might start to go through the roof in some places in the world. So the taxation system, and also asking to be paid from the government, like for example, getting some kind of benefits from the government. That is actually a very crazy question. Like I feel, because we are probably not going to get paid where we think, and there's going to be some incredible government funding going where you might not even think it's necessary. So, for example, imagine struggling in your own country and trying to make it through, and then there being some people from other countries visiting the country and getting an incredible amount of money or incredible help, incredible aid, incredible benefits when you're not getting as much money as them and you're like a local. So that has to end, basically. I feel that funding and where the governments are putting their money, that has to really be seen also in terms of these giant waves of how certain energies are supported and how certain energies are not supported. There's going to have to be seen. So, for example, incredible amount of money, incredible amount of support. Governments are, putting into certain warfare, or they're helping certain systems that aren't actually meant to be necessarily the benefactors and such. So there's also the question here. And then at the same time, not having enough money saved over in the governmental systems, because there's fraud, because there's corruption, and also a lot of the money sent overseas can go missing. And people going overseas may never come back. So, like, sometimes things go missing in Pisces. Pisces is like this sort of misty, foggy territory, and things can go amiss. So, for example, going abroad and never coming back. For example, launching something like a parcel overseas and it never reaching the destination. So there is like fraudulent stuff happening, and just loopholes where you don't know where it's all going, basically. So I believe that people have to stand on their own feet. They have to have a certain sense of pride and diligence, and not rely on other people's business or other people's belief systems or technologies to deliver anything for them. So this is a fiercely independent time, even though Pisces is not really a fiercely independent sign, but I actually feel that standing your ground and being independent will probably protect you from a lot of things. And also walking out of communities, walking away from the main archery of life, trying to keep away or have a distance between you and certain people, or wanting to be away from cities and certain environments, that could be very, very confusing and very, very frugal as well. So also sometimes with this type of energy, if there's too much of something, it's just not going to be easy. So being just one of those people in a giant group of people that are all looking for work or all looking for handouts is going to be very hard. But stay yourself. Being individuals and people that are away from the collectives, or that have preserved themselves outside of these motions and grand ideas or grand designs that society is making, are going to survive, and they're going to thrive, or they're going to find some answers. So the individual person that is strong enough to stand their ground and be not a centerpiece, or not be a part of society or certain experiences that could potentially get very emotional, Pisces emotions, that's going to be better, and it's going to become better later on. So then the next sign is going to be Aries, of course. In 26, Saturn is going to go into Aries, and those of us that maybe were isolated for a while, stood our ground, just didn't get into the thick of it with people, probably would have gained some kind of answers. People are looking for answers. Certain technologies, people are trying to find out what is the best way to live. Certain people are trying to make money from very strange things. There's a lot of struggle there. There's a lot of financial, physical struggle, like, for example, housing. There's going to be a question mark of worth. What is this worth? Where is the limit? What is poverty? What is destitute? And for certain people, it's going to be hunger. So there's going to, I'm talking about the global picture here. So the only thing basically we have to do is we have to develop some kind of alternative ways in order to fix things. And yes, we're going to have to dream them up. And I do understand some people are going to introduce themselves to very, very different ways of life, including living outside of society or outside of the law. But there's going to also be other ways to do this. This is not like naturally like a individualistic time, but it's going to be like, well, there's nothing else to do. There's nothing else to do. So we also have to be very still, because there's a lot of quietness and shame to do with certain topics in the world already as we're starting this progression soon. Some people just have nothing else to do but do that which they've done, or to be a part of that which they are a part of. So this is very hard for me as a reader to see. They're going to be definitely people innovating and trying to do things completely different, which is probably in some cases going to be quite, not necessarily dangerous, but quite crazy and even obscene what sometimes people get up to sort of try to stick things together. So very crazy people, very unfortunate ground creation, people living in very, very scary conditions. Also people wanting to do things that basically don't exist in nature. People creating very different conglomerates of people, people becoming distant from others and doing things on their own that may not necessarily be forgiven by the greater society, or they may not be seen as normal people afterwards. So this kind of interesting morphing or even mutating energy, it has to be done. Like, some people are going to go through some very, very hard things because we don't know how else to live. And if you look at what's been done to the planet and certain animal species, and how we're living now as humans in places all over the world, it's just not a question mark as to how it happens and like why human habits have gotten so strange. I guess the one thing that I can sort of think of, I found an article once on these people in Africa that are so poor, that are so hungry, that they started making patties, like patties out of dirt. So they started to eat dirt patties. So they would basically cook earth and give it to their children to eat. It would be very arrogant of me to say that's where things are at. I mean, it's not about that. It's just about understanding that sometimes people do things that are very, very intense in order to get through. So when I come to this point, and I'm talking about like, it's not just about like the Western population, this is about the whole of society. Like, we're going through incredible means probably already in some families to be able to grow. There's going to be more of that. There's going to be more crumbling question marks of what does it mean to be human these days. To me, this is really hard to talk about. And of course, it is not a very easy job to innovate one's life to such an extreme. I think that we all have to remain human and not judge one another, and just basically see how society has made certain things impossible. Also, government funding going towards like rocket launches and wars and different conflicts. And yeah, I mean, there could be incredible funding going, I don't know where, like. And then, like, say, going to the supermarket and the shelves are empty, or there's going to be something not so free. That's really difficult. I think we all have our own instincts as to what this means and how to do it if there should be any big changes in the world. There could be also quite a lot of glamour, like, in all of this, or quite a lot of karma, like certain people, of course, living it up and making even more powerful statements and extremes that are of the opposite nature. Like, say, here I am with a huge, ginormous home with my table covered in food, and like anybody can, come to my house and have dinner with me, or something like that. Maybe not anybody, but like that kind of thing also is going to take shape. Like, people really not necessarily being flamboyant, but yes, they're like associating to a different type of dream time. So there's like quite a vast variety of different types of tribes and families that are going to go through completely different types of lives and a completely different course of nature. And if your stomach allows it, if your pocket allows it, a lot of it is going to be about that. Where your family has developed or overdeveloped, if you have incredible inheritance, like that's just how it is going to be very, very hard. Some of these are long-term stories, money saved for a long time, inheritances, family names, positions of privilege. It's not just that. It's like people just having incredible wealth of faith in themselves because of what they've been a part of for a very, very long time, even historically. And then also people having no point of view, like nothing, because of where they're from, their tribes and their family systems. And yeah, it's like a very, very long term karmic wheel. And to be robbed at this point, or to be sort of put on the street, or to be like part of something very, very different or alternative, why we're here sometimes takes many lives to answer, you know. So maybe this is like your family's patterns, or this is your, I don't know, background, or even like previous existences, you know, previous karmas, previous lives. It's not really all about that either. It's like how the world works. And yes, certain grounds and territories are going to be drained of everything, drained of precious metals and minerals. There's going to be places that are just completely disfigured, and then there's going to be some places that are big and strong. So when we're talking about nationalism and countries and faith in the greater collective of people, or like certain places in the world, there's going to be something of that. People are going to be either very slim and very skinny, or like very, very impoverished, or there's going to be incredible overabundance and plushness, and it's going to even get loud. Like there's going to be something quite young and juvenile about it, even to the point where children at school want to express themselves louder in terms of what they do or do not have. You know, so that whole fashion statement is going to get stronger. People wanting to show each other what they're worth and what their family has brought, and also people wanting to share culture. But that to me is not necessary. I just feel that it's not actually a culture sharing time. So people, for example, starting to show people how they live and, you know, what for and how. So this like historical teaching of certain worths and values, and also religious, of course, and spiritual beliefs, to me that is not necessary. Like it is just so crazy to go to like a very, very struggling family and then teach them about, for example, the American way, you know, or like, I don't know, any kind of way. It is just so heavy because it's going to be so, so hard for those other groups to really be able to understand anything, and also not to necessarily shun others because of one's own state of poverty. So, for example, if people have really been cut by life, if they've been really pushed by life, not to be demonstrative about their heartache as well. So um, it's like a feeling of the world not actually owing these people anything. That's really, really harsh to say. So it's like not being owed anything, because this is a big conclusion. Pisces, Saturn, that's like, I know it sounds really heartless. It's like a big conclusion, and it's not just these people who are raising or who are struggling that are involved. There are lots of conglomerates and people behind that. So these are demographical, societal, cultural divides, and they are all across the board. I don't think this is just about this. I feel that it's also about, like, say, Christianity versus Islam, or Islam versus Buddhism and such. So I think it's more like these giant webs of consciousness trying to show up and teach each other something in this really crazy way. So like certain people might be left to struggle, or certain people might have incredible payouts because of how certain demographic societal mind works. And also, yeah, I suppose there's something to be said about God and holiness and religious spiritual things, because that's also what Saturn and Pisces could mean. I think that in some ways it isn't necessary, but people are going to start to get very provocative and emotional about where they're from, and they will want to teach each other and their children and their children's children about certain dogmas and certain ideas and understandings. So that gets hyper political, and that gets hyper nervous. And say what you want, I believe and trust that religion and blocky spirituality is usually part of a neo-political movement. I don't believe that they just stand on their own. I feel all conglomerates and large parties of people joined under the one roof or under the one faith are a political movement. So they're more joined under a certain grand scale venture. And I don't think that many people want to hear that. But I really do feel, in terms of faith and spirituality, it's your choice how you do it. But stay out of it if it gets too showy or too needy. It could be that people get too emotional or pushy or too extreme about their faith and beliefs, and also they want to control other people. So for example, having the Christian way or the Muslim way, or the different types of ways, and they're putting their book like the Kabbalah or the Torah or the Bible or Quran, anything in front of them, as if they mean to be kind of like a part of it, but it's actually not always that. And we're going to see some really big mutations in culture and religious beliefs during this time, simply because people want to be conscious and true, and they will put their own words into the sacred scriptures, basically. And they will want to be shown the way by other people also that have got that going on. So it's just about radicalism. It is about tyranny. It is about tyrants. It's about angry, unfathomable things happening because somebody's book says this, somebody's book says that. It's going to be very angry. For me, for example, I suppose many people to be interpreted in a certain way by a certain organization or a party. There could be political or spiritual interpretation, or like somebody's father said this and somebody's grandfather said that, so the patriarchal lines are just going to go crazy. People bashing the laws, they trying to like put that into people's faces and tell them how to live their life, and tell them whether or not they are or are not deserving of life itself, because of what a certain book says and certain religious, political actually principles. At the end of the day, becoming more than one's own body, one's own life. So this could lead to a huge crisis. And yes, we're talking about some conglomerates, like some certain people's beliefs or faiths being higher than thou. So that's really, really hard for me to see. Tyranny, like Putin, like other people also in the world, is just going to be like this giant leap also for humanity, because we don't want that. We don't want to be part of this wave. So the feeling is that living in any kind of places in the world is going to become maybe a little bit extraordinary, and in some ways it's going to be incredibly unsafe and unsophisticated to live in a part of the world where there's going to be giant religious, spiritual, or dogmatic motions. To go for it is just really hard. Going into a protest, my gosh, like going under the fire of the bullets, going to war, being part of a demonstration, being part of any kind of large-scale socio-political phenomena during these types of cruel and unlucky times is just going to be so great not to be able to do that sometimes. And some of it is going to be just about walking away. Also, okay, Saturn, building structures, people making bunkers, people making places all over the world that are also very like never to be seen, the one and only, or the very different people, very different places. They're putting their, not just individuality, they're putting their innermost psychic, emotional truths into what they're doing, or they're going directly towards the bush, which is exactly what we're going to do probably at the end of the day. It's like, if there is a way to live in an extreme environment, or if there is a way to live outside of culture and outside of any governmental party. That's probably going to be here in countries like Bolivia and Peru and Ecuador. I don't think this is all about that, but there's going to be probably definitely some thought about moving away from like England and France and Russia and Scotland. I don't know, like where different places in the world, you know, like to be able to live in a very, maybe in a way, unfortunate environments. Because you see, Saturn Pisces is not just about building a castle in the sky, though I do believe some people are going to definitely do that. There's going to be some grand gestures, mosques and churches and other kind of like hyper principled activity going on in the building world, in a structural world, but that's not going to be part of just normal human world. Humans might not have to be there, basically. So to me, the best way is to avoid that grind and that ruckus and that energy of political, socio-political organizations coming out of any leftist, rightist, middle way, anywhere, and just trying to do things on your own and trying to stick one's own body together, one's own knowledge together by basically putting things together in your own unique way and not counting on the mass to basically understand you or to help you, not counting on government subsidies, not counting on, I don't know, father or like big man over there or the big guy in the sky. The big guy in the sky, guy, he's a guy, he's a guy. You know, it's not that he's a girl. Why would he be a human being? You know, that's the thing. It's like, you know, the big male, male human in the sky with a beard and everything, you know, to help you. Sorry to laugh if you really believe that. I'm laughing. The thing is basically, to try and help one's own connection, one's own luck, one's own universe through basically very, very different and maybe even distasteful for some experiences or like change. Also, some people are going to be able to change their bodies and their self-esteem, changing the waters inside their body, quit smoking, quit drinking, you know, changing your ways. The best option, I'm saying, like, is just to live outside of these giant conglomerates and not to be touched by those huge downfalls that I'm seeing for the greater human experience based on these huge pendulums, iconic pendulums that are going to be fighting against each other during these years. So this is like the right against the left. This is like the Christian way versus the Muslim way. This is like the Muslim way versus the Buddhist way. This is like the feminist movement versus, you know, whatever's happening. It's going to be very hard to speak to certain people as well. They're just going to be so caught up on their stuff. There's got to be some terrible people also coming out of all of this because they just really wanted to heal themselves through this giant mess. I mean, like, they can't just live a life. They got to go through war. They can't just experience life. They got to go through some kind of like, my forefathers, you know, I stand for my people, like all of this hero stuff, heroism. It just doesn't make any sense. And it's hard to talk to them. Like if somebody's really hardwired to spit certain type of ideology at you, it's just you got to close the door and you got to just make your way. It's really good for closures. The best way always is to have your own individuality intact, to have your own, I don't know, bags or books or your own kids or your own service, your own little house in the middle of nowhere, or your own friendship groups, like your own handmade goods, you know, your own hand-created, handcrafted, I don't know, hand-grown, you know, just grown food, to believe in who you are beyond these psychoses. And the psychoses have been going for such a long time. So now they've become very ripe. So the communist movement has become very ripe. You know, nationalist movements, you know, so what you're seeing now didn't happen overnight. It brewed. There was a long brewing process and probably quite a big conglomerate of people that eventually made it possible to be this. There are probably also some things that you are doing or you're a part of that you're succeeding in or not succeeding in because of a long-term conglomerate endeavor. So, for example, you are now seen as this or seen as that, or you are a perfect part of the story because of a large timeline, an ancestral line, or maybe because you've evolved in something to such an extreme. And the idea basically is to reap the fruit, the fruit and not feel fear. For example, if you've been taking drugs half of your life or a big part of your life, okay, you're reaping the fruit here. If you've been saying things that are not right, you're going to reap the fruit. Karma is a huge in Pisces Saturn. It's huge long-term karmas, and it's not just like being snapped for something. For example, you've been smoking meth, example. And it's not just about being caught by the cops and told off. It's like, okay, now having to spend 2 or 3 years in a certain type of facility, facilities. Incarceration, also for some people, not just having a little smack, having a long haul re-implantation, having a long haul change. So, for example, universities and studies are very good for that. It's like you have to change your life. So, you've got to study, you've got to go to this facility for like 4 years to get your degree, like that kind of thing. You don't just go and get a job. You can't. You have to go through like a certain type of like baking process. You got to go through a certain type of exile, or you got to go through a certain type of workload, basically in order to have a chance at something else, which is kind of what universities and schools truly are. It's like they take a person, a natural, normal person, agile person who's totally a part of their family path, and they change them. They bake them into what society wants, or into kind of like a median between what they wanted to be, what they wanted to do, and what other people wanted. So the whole basically force here is a slow relevance found, and yes, some people are not going to be there for that. Also, I do understand Saturn, okay, Pisces is high mortality. I don't want to tell you too much here, but okay, it's high mortality rate. It's like the whole truth, the whole spiritual kind of neo-physical, like ultimate truth might be suspended. So people being suspended, and the ultimate way to be suspended is death, basically having to die or having to no longer be there, no longer being able to show up, having a big hand in the face, being a fugitive, or being unable to risk it. So you can't enter certain doors because you can't risk it. So certain countries would just be like, nah, like hand in the face, So there is like a way, yeah, it's going to be hard to understand, I feel, later on as to what happened. And the only way, the best way, is to develop yourself into a real, true hero. Yeah, some people can also be like Moses or Jesus Christ, these like big leaders, Muhammad or whoever. Big leaders that basically come out of the pack and try to do something for others. And yes, there is a huge place in society given to people that do things for nothing. For example, I don't know, painting murals, making cakes, I don't know, soup kitchens for the homeless, given advice, I don't know, helpful hands. The idea basically is not to ever have to be in a culture. Again, the whole idea is not to keep on feeding those conglomerates that tell you that they're the reason why this happens. So it's not necessarily, I'm working at the soup kitchen for the faith in Jesus Christ. It's like, why don't you just say, I'm going to do that because I just love people and I just want to make sure that everybody's fed. It's better to be an individual here than to be underneath. It's very easy also to be hired for some people and still be part of these large fractals, large conglomerates. I just feel that it would be so much easier to just be an individual and be like, look, I took the initiative. I'm an altruist. Great. To be an altruist, really great. at this time. I just wanted to clear my karma, my family's karma, by being an extra nice person and like giving food and shelter to all of these people. Okay, that's all right, but just try to be who you are. It's just so hard to work through these anonymous fake groups. It's like Confucius says or Buddha says, because of those I did this. It's like try to be just normal. It's like, okay, look, I felt it, I knew it was time, and I wanted to give help. And trying not to kind of close your eyes and being underneath or subjectified to a certain type of movement in society or the world. It's really important not to be a part of that. It's way better, like, wake up, people. You know, God is not necessarily a man or a woman. God is actually like light energy. Like, God is not God is not like a guy like this, and then you have to imitate this guy and be like this as well with your little book, you know. Like, that's really sad. And the times have come for like mass karma, and sometimes mass slaughter can be part of that karma, simply because people just won't get out of that dream. They just won't get themselves together. They won't they will never. It's like so these large energies are basically here to reconcile what is the worth of human life, like what is the worth of your life, you know, and why do you live. And so many of us are unhappy people. We're just struggling and getting by, and also we're still praying to a father or mother god, and we still don't understand why people they just don't have any faith. They don't have any backbone to who they are. It's just so weird. It's so hard these days just to be alive. For so many people. So these karmic changes that I've just talked about, they're coming here for no other reason. It's just because it really hurts, and the amount of ignorance and dystopia and sadness and sensitivity that we have in our lives is just remarkable, and it's going to hurt us only more later in the years, you know, with these new high-flying technologies and, you know, the AI, whatever, like all these industries that are like now taking off. Even with these new bouts of idealism based in technology, even with these scientific discoveries, people are still bound to some very, very hardcore, like basic and primitive states of consciousness. And that's what for certain huge, giant things happen. And it's very sucky. It's very sad. Certain technology also will be developed to help those people too. So there's like a big caring energy that is still there in the sky, and it is still trying to be like, okay, look, not all is so bad, and quite a lot of people are going to get rescued. People are still going to be saved. There's going to be people saved that are completely angry and radical and only want harm for others. They also going to be saved. Like, there's going to be so many people helped. There's going to be so many people kind of in the boat. Like, it's like a flood, and then there's a boat, and like they will, it's a metaphor, and they will sort of get onto the boat because I don't know, life still works this way. And it's so weird, you know. It's just so weird that people don't see each other, and they can't recognize nature for what she is or what it is, and they can't recognize a human for who they are. They're still working through these different Bibles and books, and they don't understand what to do next. So there's like just a giant gap, I feel, of consciousness between people that have actually developed their psyche and their intellect, and people that have never ever thought outside of what they were given by their ancestors. That's really hard. So people are so stuck in their way, and then we're going to inevitably come back to the cycle of creation. So we're going to go into Aries Saturn. We're going to come back to creating and crafting and doing. Saturn in Pisces is not necessarily all about destruction, but it is about kind of dislodging the previous cycle, the previous system. Pisces being the last sign in the sequence, so it's like the end. And then eventually Aries Saturn is going to be, let's be brave here. Let's do this. Let's build this big house. Let's try this. Let's make this village. Let's help each other. And then there are going to be all of these very weird experiences also still continuing. So this whole like maybe racist or spiritualist or religious, dogmatic, emotional, blind karma is going to come up during these years, and it's going to be replaced by these nice healthy hands, and nice healthy feet, people with big arms and strong backs, trying to help life continue. There's going to be quite a lot of optimism and altruism in terms of structuring and becoming one again, and wanting everybody to involve, and the family getting bigger and bigger, and life getting more and more exciting and more fast after 2026. But there's going to be so many friends lost and so many people also found. It's going to be such a big scatter as to who is in and who is out. Conglomerates are going to change. Who is inside certain conglomerates is going to change and reshuffle. But that's going to be very also hard later, because there's going to be probably something in the neighborhood. This like how can I say? They say there's something in the water, or there's something in the air. So there's going to be a huge optimistic vibration taking over the earth in 2026, where people actually really want to be strong and young and try at it again. They want to try at life again. But then there's going to be like all these weirdos in the mix, and maybe they'll keep it hush hush. They won't tell anybody that they're like secretly like served like so many years in prison, or they've been like really crazy and they've done some really extreme things because of their psychology and their needs, or their beliefs. But they are still going to be there. So it's going to be like these very, very weird people still included in certain conglomerates. And I don't want to like say also anything too extreme, too harsh. But yeah, consider Saturn and Pisces as a kind of cleansing of sorts, because it's like worms coming up to the surface after the rain. Certain extremist action and certain obsession, as impolite as it is, like bear with it, because these people have to face results, and certain people have to experience karma. Pisces is a sign of absolute loss. It's a sign of loss sometimes. It is a sign of incredible extremes and karmas. Let people go through these extremes. So it's an okay thing to allow nature to take its course, basically, because it's kind of like a way to deal with certain imbalances that we've had in our lives and in society. So all of these imbalances, also in the body, endocrine health, anything like that, there's going to have to be a big change, and a coming of age, I suppose. It's not even a coming of age. It's like an operation. It's like an operation. It's like being in hospital. It's a very strong wave to be able to live a better, more simpler and cleaner life later on. So as we go into Saturn and Aries, it's going to be just very nice and healthy and easy and simple. And it's not just about people and what they mean. It's not just about, like, say, convicts or like very strange people hiding between the normal simple society, normal simple civilians, but it is going to be a little bit like a snake in the grass type of feeling in 2026. It's not just about this. It's just about returning home and wanting to be sparkly and clean and loving things as they are, and making that which is obvious. So before we get to the sparkly, bright and fresh, obvious feeling that Aries Saturn is going to give in 2026, we're going to have to go through some big changes, some big karmas, and yes, hospital beds, yes, and incarceration, yes, and also like some kind of like cleansing, like mass cleansing, like a mass crisis, which I don't think anybody is really prepared to even hear about today. It's going to be a very hard time for certain people, and also the vulnerable. And if you are somebody who's suffered a lot with your mental, physical, spiritual health, it's important to seek advice and to start your own way, so this isn't just being hidden, like the government is going to pay for me, or like, yeah, like I'm a Christian, I don't really participate, I'm a Christian, because that organization will take care of me. Having others take care of you and being stamped in as kind of like a faceless person is just not going to help you get there. So yeah, it is about being the in-between also in some places. I do definitely understand some people can't afford to just stand strong and be mean and strong and tough during this time. They can't be there because of certain experiences. So yeah, I do definitely understand why people would want to hide out, like go to the bush or like go traveling, go in between towns. Some people will seek refuge or asylum probably even all their lives if they already started to do that. I have to tell you a little bit about that. Okay, it's like 45 minutes, but okay. There are certain people, okay, because Pisces is a sign also of the travel. It's not the travel, it's like long haul overseas travel and escapes. Like some people are just not going to be able to survive certain experiences without having real change. And it might not be very easy for some, but like people that are just on the road between countries and families and people that are always traveling, or people that don't want to be caught, and people that don't want to be seen, people that are faceless and have no identity. That's going to be happening during these years. It's like water flowing and you don't know where it's going. It's like underground little movements, and also incredible secrecy, and incredible paths of the nomad. So the nomadic history and culture that's going to be relived by many, many people. Being a nomad, being in between, and not having anybody to answer to, but also not having anybody to really say anything to as well. That's really scary for me. So just notice that some people might be without settlement, they might be without earth, or they might be without any reason to be packed into a culture or a history. Yeah, so some people, yeah, also disestablishment. Sure, why not? People will never want to live in a house again. They will never want a TV. They will never want to cook their own dinners. They'll just change lives continuously throughout their generations. So the nomad returns basically during these times in certain families. So that's coming back to the roots of humanity and as to why we've come here in the first place. So that's a very interesting thing for me to see. I can't also say no to this tactical logic because it hurts. It hurts not having a home, or sometimes not having peace. But I think it's going to be one of the only ways that some people are going to be able to establish their place in the world today. And it might not actually even be just them. It might be everybody they know, or it's kind of like a consciousness that spreads. It's probably going to be their children and their children's children that will not be able to settle and have a house for longer than a year or something like that. So yeah, goodbye establishment. In some years, yeah, we might be able to say that about this time. Goodbye establishment. Established life and established wanting of a life that makes sense. So gypsies and thieves, it's not just about gypsies and thieves. It's just about cultures of the days gone by having to revisit us because there's just no other way to be, you know. So yeah, antiquity. But I'm not telling you like antiquity like, you know, the Middle Ages. It's not like that. Like antiquity, like of the real nomadic kind. And then trying to remember how you would have lived if you lived back then, and being faithful and being helpful and being kind and being good, even though certain people might not have a solid home or a solid place to be, or even a certain nationality anymore, which is something important here to also say. Anyway, thank you very much. Now, I suppose I will do the 12 signs. I will do the 12 signs and see what comes up. And also, please have a look in the comment section below for my website and links. And if you'd like a reading, yes, I'll be here. So thank you, and I'll see you next time.